read just one small paragraph from his book, which he analyzes Hegel and links it with the concept of civilization. He says, for Hegel, one of the most important aspects of civilization is the search for empathy as the common humanity presents in oneself and the other. Civilization, then, for Hegel, is the actual fulfillment of self-consciousness, as the process of knowing the other as one knows oneself. So, as we know also, and he acknowledges that this is altogether a different reading of Hegel, because Hegel was not famous for his democratic ideas and also for certain philosophical ideas that he acknowledges that it may be surprising for readers to see a lesser known insight of Hegel as an advocate of common humanity and a shared empathy, since he is usually regarded as a critic of democratic government and realist theory of nation state. And finally, what I want to point out here is that Professor also conceptualized the concept of decivilizing, which has been already used by many other scholars, but what Professor Jahanbegloo argues here is completely a nuanced understanding of decivilizing, and I would like him to talk about all this for us today.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be back at the South Asian University, see faces that I know. Usually I've been here many times, and but this is the first time I'm lecturing in English here. Last time it was always in Farsi. Anyway, thank you again. Thank you to Omar, and thank you to all of you. Now, before getting into the content of the book, and I try to be brief so we can ask questions and we can have a good conversation on it. I have to explain a little bit the background of this book. Actually, it happens that 2017 has been a prolific year in publications for me, and this has to do with the fact that it's not that I was sitting like a middle-aged, clerk or in a room and writing all the time. But I mean, publishers usually take time to publish books. So what I've been working on in the past 3 years, suddenly many books got out in 2017, and it happens that they have been very much interrelated, despite the fact that I've been publishing them around the world. Now, Decline of Civilization, which I didn't choose the topic and the title. The title was chosen by the publisher, Aleph, because I wanted to put decivilizing society in the same way that somebody like Ivan Illich talks about deschooling society, decivilizing society. And he said, well, if you put a title like that, nobody's going to buy the book, because it's so difficult to understand what you mean. And I said, well, I explained what is decivilization. But he said, well, I would prefer to have Decline of Civilization. And then Ramin accepted to write a preface to it, because next to that, we were doing a book of conversations in my series at Oxford University Press, which the book got out a month ago, after 3 years. And this is a book of conversation. It's called Talking History. So Ramin again here has collaborated with me, or I have collaborated with her, since she's my senior and somebody from whom I've learned a lot on all these historical concepts. But nevertheless, next to this book, there have been several other books, and one of them is published in the US by Roman and Littlefield, Lexington Press, around let's say 9 months ago, and it's called Gasflies in the Public Space. So when I have this pessimistic view, which will seem very theoretical and philosophical, in the other book I try to find a more optimistic, practical solution to it, which is, the solution is that if we are living in a context which looks very blocked and we don't know what to do in today's world, there are always gasflies. And I have to explain this word that maybe some of you don't know, because gasfly the history of thought and history of ideas goes back to Socrates and to Plato's book, where Socrates, in his trial with Athenians, he says that I'm a gadfly and I'm going to come back to you, and each time I have this critical view, like a gadfly which sits on a horse and picks a horse and doesn't let this horse be passive and dreamy. I will come back and I will get you out of your dream. So gadflies actually have been public intellectuals. Socrates having been the first public intellectual in the world, up to let's say Chomsky or Edward Said, the last public intellectuals that we have, or maybe Habermas until up to some point. But gadflies have been also public intellectuals. Now, this is the response that I've been giving in the other book about when we're living in a decivilizing society, how we can get out of it. But going back to this book, actually, I quote many authors in this book, but I want to start with the quotation from one Spanish philosopher on whom I've worked a lot and I like very much. He is not, I'm sure that most of you have not read him, but he's a really great philosopher of the 20th century, and his name is Ortega y Gasset. He wrote this famous book which is called The Revolt of the Masses, translated from Spanish into English. And one of the quotes that I have in this book from Ortega y Gasset goes like this. He says, we don't know, and pay attention because I'm sure that it's going to give you a huge nightmare. He says, we don't know what is happening to us. And that is exactly what is happening to us, not knowing what is happening to us. So I like this quote very much because I think it goes back to the level of, I mean, it tries to explain in a very philosophical manner the way, the world in which we're living today, which is a world of meaninglessness and thoughtlessness. Two of the concepts which come back all the time in my book. Meaninglessness and thoughtlessness. Meaning that we live in a world where we don't think anymore, we just have opinions. And Facebook is a good example of it. Internet is that we all have opinions, but we don't have really a thought and a thinking. And this is not very new. I mean, for those of you who are readers of philosophy and you have a little bit more curiosity, go and read instead of just watching Bollywood movies and having and smoking weed or drinking beer. I think that you are familiar with the work of Heidegger. And Heidegger is famous, maybe the greatest philosopher of 20th century. He has a book which is called What is Thinking, which are actually seminars that he gave in Germany after the Second World War. And in that book, actually, which I quote, in that book, in those seminars, he talks about how is it that we are living in such a thought-provoking world, and we are living in a thought-provoking world. I mean, one example is Donald Trump. He has to make us think. I mean, an animal like him, a political animal like him, has to make us think. How is it that we're living in such a thought-provoking world and we don't think? We just have opinions, and we cannot. So where has this process of thinking, which has been present through the ages, from Plato to Hegel, among the Muslims, among Muslim philosophers, Christian philosophers, Judaic philosophers, Hindu, Buddhists, all these debates that Buddhists and Hindus have in this area of the world, where are they gone? And why are we producing, now I asked this question in the book, why are we producing more and more populist leaders? And we are in a crisis of leadership, and we are in a crisis of knowing exactly where we are. So the question that I ask is that this meaninglessness and thoughtlessness actually has degraded us by robbing us of our self-esteem. We don't care anymore if we are not noble in spirit, because nobility of the spirit is not very important. You know, You can come and sit, as people here in this room that I see, you can come and sit here and try to listen to me, but at the same time you're playing with your iPhone. So that is when you have lost your self-esteem, you know? It means that you pretend that you are here to have a nobility of spirit, but at the same time you're so into this techno-scientific world and consumerism that you're not thinking anymore. And you cannot give even a reason of your presence in a place where you should have full attention and know why you are there and why you want to participate. So this is what I called actually decivilization, because in my book, a society, and I'm describing our society as a society of decivilization, when the individuals like us who are living in those societies are, they don't have, as Omar said, they don't have anymore this capacity of thinking. They don't have anymore this capacity of giving meaning to their lives, especially social and political life, and they have lost their capacity of interconnectedness and empathy. So they connect themselves through all these new technologies, but actually there is no empathy behind it. And how do I define that? I go back to my Hegelian philosophy and the issue that Hegel calls recognition of the other. Because there is a famous quote by Hegel, and I invite you to go and read this difficult philosopher. He says, a subject, a self, cannot be free if he or she does not think about the freedom of the other. So the otherness is very important. You know what we call alterity in our language, academic language. And here, the concept that I bring, which I get from French intellectuals actually, is the otherness of the other. Now, we do not, in a decivilizing society like ours, the otherness of the other is not important. What is important is how you deal with the other. For example, we all have a very utilitarian view of the other person. Okay, how much you can help me, bring me utility? How much I can benefit from you? How much advantages I get from you, either sexually or materialistically or spiritually? How much? But I'm not thinking of your otherness. Now, your otherness is when you are, let's say, Indian, when you are Iranian, when you are Afghan, when you are Sri Lankan, when you're Indonesian, when you're any of these, okay? Meaning that you have this, I'm not talking here about identity politics, I'm talking about a concept of when you consider the otherness of the other. Now, empathy without the otherness of the other cannot work. And here, the Hegelian concept is the recognition of the other by the self. Now, by definition, in a society, in a decivilizing society, you do not have any more recognition of the other by the self. You just have the recognition of the self. The best example of it is actually in today's politics. Today's politics is a very selfish politics, and what I define it as Trumpization of politics, because Donald Trump is a very anthropological, actually, specimen of this form of politics, and that's why I call it Trumpization, because Trump actually, if we say Trumpization, we can make a comparison between Trump and Erdogan, for example, of Turkey. He has the same problem. Or Duterte of the Philippines. Or, let's say, Maduro of Venezuela. Or, and many others, okay? So it happens that all of them are populist presidents or prime ministers. But there is a reason to that, because actually, for them, as is the question of politics and the crisis of politics, moral leadership is no more important. Politics with conscience is no more important. This is what Václav Havel was talking about when he was president and before that. He said, if we are engaged in politics, we need to have conscience. There is no politics without conscience. Today we live politics without conscience.
We did politics without moral leadership. And more important, one of the ideas which are very important for me is the idea of shared humanity. So we have entered a decivilizating society where there is no more idea of shared humanity, no more common values, no more a moral minimum which would be important for us to give a telos to our future societies. Now, at the level of the global bureaucracies like the United Nations and all these different protocols and institutions, the bureaucratic language of shared humanity is defined mostly by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But it's not applied as it should be. It's only on paper. As Martin Luther King Jr. Describes very well about the American Constitution during the Civil Rights Movement, he says, we are not here to define democracy as thin paper. We are here to define democracy as quick action. Now, Declaration of Human Rights is thin paper in today's world. It's no more quick action because nobody recognizes it. Dictators don't recognize it. They have capital punishment in Iran. They have capital punishment in China. They can misuse human rights in India. They misuse it and misinterpret it everywhere. But everybody has ratified it in the international law. So there is a issue there, and the issue is that it has to do not only with our politicians, but with the view of the citizens themselves who admit and accept this view of politics. Now, here I think that for our future conversation is very important. I go back to my Greeks and I redefine politics as they did, as the art of organizing the society. Now, when all of you sit down in the cafe downstairs or in your rooms and you start talking about politics, either in your countries or in India or somewhere else, you only talk about party politics, or you talk about power politics. You never go back to the roots of politics itself as the art of organizing the society. The only thing which is not important for citizens of the world today is the organization of our world. The only thing which is not important. We never talk about it. We only talk about characters, figures, political figures, statistics, economic statistics, social statistics, health statistics, and how governments can work with these statistics. Okay? But where is the art of organizing society? Nowhere. I was listening to the news. The new French president, whom the French thought that, okay, if we don't go and vote for the traditional parties and we vote for Mr. Macron, he is going to give us a new image of politics. The only thing that we were talking about in the past few days is about his makeup and $31,000 of makeup. I mean, imagine this is what I'm talking about. This is where young citizens of the world like yourself sitting in this room, you're completely alienated by what is politics. So you will, at the end of the day, you are tired about, and you go back to your iPhones and start playing with it, and you chat with each other, and you try to find a way to escape this questioning. Now, because of that, we no more have the art of questioning, and this is where public intellectuals are important, have always been important since Socrates. We don't even question the questions, and the right questions are never asked. Never asked. For example, in politics, in our political world, including Mr. Modi and BJP, the question of justice is never there. We never ask, as Plato used to do and Socrates, the question of freedom, justice. What is freedom? What is justice? People like Karl Marx and Hegel used to do that. Liberals like John Stuart Mill used to do that. Philosophers in 20th century like Camus and Sartre used to do that. You know, they talked about action and freedom. We no more ask about that. Why? Because we are somehow blocked by this party politics and I would say even identity politics that we see in Charlottesville, we see in everywhere else, especially in the past few years. We see it in Turkey, we see it in Latin America, has replaced citizen politics. Okay, so this is also one of the things. So what is missing here, which is so important? I think we need to make a distinction between a capacity to citizen building and distinguish it from the capacity of developing a political program. When you're in power politics or in party politics, you are actually in a capacity of making a program for your party and coming to power. How to win the elections. The only thing that is in the mind of Mr. Modi and BJP right now is to win the 2019 elections. Okay? The only thing which is in the mind of the Afghan presidents is, oh, how can we somehow sustain our power and try to be as long as we can in the place we are. Okay? This you saw it with the coup d'etat in Turkey. This you saw it when Erdogan arrested 100,000 people against Fethullah Gulen. The only thing which is important is to be in power. Okay? And citizens are completely, and citizen building is actually completely forgotten. In American politics, they used to be the founding. The irony is that Trump, he says, "I want to make America great." Now, somebody would ask him. Of course, he doesn't answer all the interviews or questions. But somebody can ask him, "Do you know where America comes from? Have you read the Federalists? Have you read Thomas Jefferson? Have you read Henry Adams? Do you know about Abraham Lincoln?" And he said it's not important. So the interesting part is that all the founding fathers of America, which is supposed to be great by Mr. Trump, they talked about virtue, civic virtue. And the only thing that doesn't exist anymore in today's America is civic virtue. Neither on the president's side, nor on the people who are supporting him. No civic virtue. So we are left here with the problem that in the public space, and this is where again makes thoughtlessness and meaninglessness of our society. We are no more, as Edward Said and Chomsky and others used to say, we are no more speaking truth to power. What we are doing, we are seizing power to defend a certain truth. There is a difference between the two. The work of a philosopher, a critical intellectual, is to speak truth to power, not to seize power to talk about a certain truth. These are the two different things in our world. So we are dealing here with a hierarchy and a hierarchical mode of thinking and being, which has become an experience of our everyday life. Now, another point which I make, I go back, of course, I don't want to be very long, I go back to this concept of civilization. Why do I call it Decline of Civilization? Because I show that in many chapters there is, I talk about the barbarians and civilization. When the Greeks, who did the Greeks call barbarians? Well, those who didn't speak Greek. But one of the factors which are so important in our history of humanity is that despite the fact that people fought against each other, they somehow were meaningful for each other and they somehow helped each other out. Now, how did they do this? For example, the Mongols, who Genghis Khan and Hulagu and all others, when they invaded Asia, well, they destroyed a lot of things. But then the dynasties, the Mongolian dynasties, which came after them, they started reconstructing. And many of them, they internalized, like in Iran, for example, like in China also, they internalized the culture of the country, and they actually went in the direction of the culture of the country. Like the best example is Urjaitu in Iran, who have built the Blue Mosque in Isfahan, you know. Now, in today's civilization, we don't have anymore this intercrossing, border crossing between cultures. You know? We're talking about a global culture, but we don't know how to influence each other. We influence each other through dishes. Meaning, multiculturalism is actually going through our intestine. Because I make fun of Canada, he's also Canadian. Because Canadians, they always talk about their multiculturalism, and actually their multiculturalism is no knowledge of the culture of the other. The only thing that they do is they share office spaces with each other. You work with the Russian, Ukrainian, Indonesian, Indian, Pakistani, and the best you can do is to go to the restaurant and eat their food. And you say, okay, I know about their culture, but you don't know shit. You don't know anything about their culture. That's the point. You don't know anything about their culture. And they call it multiculturalism. So the problem which is missing in today's world is this intercultural dialogue, which is no more there. You know? There is no temptation to know more. And for you guys who are sitting there and you are consumers of the internet and how do I say, all this internet world, how much do you get to know more about things? Do you know as people knew in the 18th century? No. Goethe was a philosopher who knew about, or a poet who knew about Hafiz. And he talked about Weltliteratur, world literature, and he said Hafiz, who is an Iranian mystic poet, should be part of this world literature. So you see, the problem is that the civilization, in this play civilization, there are several things which are missing that we can talk about it as a decivilizing process. First of all, there is no moral compass. So not only we don't have moral leadership at the level of the politics of everyday life, our civilizations and cultures are not giving us any more moral compass. So what it would be the result? The result is the Islamic State. Islamic State has nothing to do with the classic Muslim Islamic fundamentalism. Has nothing to do, because the classical Islamic fundamentalism is Hassan al-Banna and Sayyid Qutb. Meaning people who read the Quran, they come actually from the tradition of Afghani and Abdu, first of all. Rashid Reza Afghani, Abdu, Rashid Reza, and then you have the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay? So they are actually in a line of thought which became radical Islam after Rashid Reza and with Hassan al-Banna and then Sayyid Qutb. Okay? The difference is that who are the terrorists of the Islamic State? Muslim kids who are born in France, UK, Australia, Canada, Germany, India, many places. Now, India is fine because India is partly a Muslim country. I mean, it's the second largest Muslim country in the world, or Indonesia, the first largest Muslim country in the world. But we are talking, the phenomenon that you have to pay attention is that how is it that the third generation or fourth generation of North African Arabs, who are brought up in a culture, a European culture, they don't know anything about the European culture. They don't know anything about their own Islamic culture. They don't know anything about their North African culture. They don't speak one word of Arabic, and they have become some kind very thuggish, elements which can be used from prisons up to terrorism, and use this violence. So the conclusion that I want to take from this is that we look at it as, okay, this is a way to fight against globalization. This is a way to fight against liberalism. They don't know anything about what is globalization and liberalism. They have not opened one book in their life. So we are talking about a society which is European society today, Western society, which cannot educate any more young people. And I will go even further, because we are in a university. If you students and we professors, we don't do more than our jobs in the hand of whites, and all the leaders of the grand parties in Canada are white. In the summer I was doing a workshop at Queen's University, and I said, well, what is missing in Canada, in countries like Canada, is intercultural awareness. And we need to work on it. Because
You come, you invite, there were some indigenous people, you know, natives of native Indians. And I said, you invite native Indians and you want them to listen to you and you say to them, you have robbed their country, like the Spaniards did with South America. And you come and you have the audacity of looking them in the face and say, accommodate yourself. And we are for mutual accommodation. How do you want people who have been robbed from their culture and civilization to accommodate? They cannot. So we need to find new ways of interconnectedness and new ways. And this is what I'm talking about, empathy. Meaning, empathy is a concept which was used by Herder, the historian, German historian in 18th century, and he called it in German Einfühlen. He meant by that, when you're looking at another culture, there has to be an effort of understanding of that culture. But that effort of understanding is not only academic. You sit down, you put your ass down, you sit down with the people and you talk with them. And you ask them about their culture. And you try to understand them, not to impose your way of doing to them, which has been done by the West up to now. Okay? So that's what makes IS reaction. Because at some point, you have young people in their 20s who are thugs, and they say, we don't want any more of the human civilization, we're going to destroy it. We're going to destroy everything of the human heritage, and that's why everywhere they go, the first thing that they destroy are the museums. Because they don't have this concept of human heritage. Now, I tell you, like Bamiyan was also, the Buddhas of Bamiyan in Afghanistan was also an example with Taliban. They destroyed it because they said it's not part of our heritage. But the truth is that Taliban itself doesn't have a heritage. Because Taliban is a nihilistic, entity. It's not even a Muslim in the sense that Al-Ghazali was a Muslim, Hafiz was a Muslim, many others were Muslims. And these are, when you're talking about Islam, you're talking about a civilization. Islamic civilization, Islamic science, Islamic philosophy, mysticism, that's Islam. But when you're talking about assassins who in the name of Islam and they go and kill people and they destroy human heritage, they are not. But this is a reaction against what I'm saying. A decivilizing action against a decivilizing society, which does not want to get into a dialogue with them. So I think that what we can do is to, we have to, once again, we have to transvalidate our values, because our values of today are values of are three C's, I say. Consumerism, conformity, complacency. I hope you all understand these words. Consumerism, conformism, complacency. We conform ourselves to every law they give us. We are complacent towards unnatural phenomena like Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump is a specimen who sees politics and world politics as a real estate. As if he wants to build a condo, as if he wants to buy a house. He comes in, he asks you in your country, how much do you cost? I buy it. Okay? He would look with the Saudis. You give me money. It's exactly as if you were looking at movies like Casino or these movies by Martin Scorsese, where you have these fights with a Matthew slang speaking, and they always talk about money. Okay, how much does your wife cost? I buy it. How much your country costs? I buy it. And so that's why in 3-4 months he has lost 5 of his collaborators, because nobody can work with this person who is a self-centered policymaker. So this is what I'm talking about. The reaction towards Trump coming from any other country, what should it be? What can it be? It's only violence. It's only rejection. And this is, I think this is what we have in a world where we don't have real reciprocity, real mutuality, real cooperation. Everything is on paper, actually, and nothing happening really in reality. We end up actually becoming very violent, or we end up losing our vote.
I also wanted to ask about how do you bring Gandhi in this context, because
You talk about how Gandhi argues about not only colonization of India but also Western civilization in his book in the Swaraj, to solve the problem of empathy and also recognition of others. You know, there is a critique of Gandhi which some people may not agree with that. Arundhati Roy wrote a book called Descent and the Doctor and Descent. And therein he argues how Gandhi, when he was in South Africa, there was a group of people which Gandhi was along with them in prison at a point of time, and then an anti-colonial slider also. They were Kafirs. And Gandhi once rejected to eat the same food that Kafirs were eating because he thought that Indians deserve a better food. For instance, rice cooked with ghee. And later on also he rejected to sleep in the same room along with Kafirs because he thought that they are so much downgraded people. And then on, he goes, what Arundhati Roy concludes is like, history has been kind to Gandhi because somehow everyone likes him. Obama liked him, also the movement for Occupy movement. Anarchists love him, so does the establishment. Modi loves him, and also Rahul Gandhi. So it's somehow very complicated, Gandhi. If we have just interpretation of Gandhi based on one text, which is Hindi Swaraj, and leave out all other thoughts or letters of Gandhi, can we have a comprehensive understanding of them?
Well, I mean, first of all, Gandhi, we should not look at Gandhi as a saint. You know, most of the time we look at him as a saint, and we say, well, how can one be a saint and have weaknesses? But he's a human being with his own weaknesses. So we have to, when we look at Gandhi like I've been doing in my work, we have to do it in a very objective way. I mean, see where his points of strength and where you can find the points of weakness. But that doesn't mean that you can say everything in the name of Gandhi. You know, you cannot first of all, Mr. Modi and Rahul Gandhi, they use Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. You know, they don't like Gandhi. Certainly not. Because if they liked Gandhi, they would be like Gandhi. But they are power politicians. You know, so power politicians, most of them, they were very happy that Gandhi was assassinated because he would have been trouble for many people because the only trouble is that he was very obsessed by his ideas and he would come back and back and back and tell Nehru and Patel and all the company, you have to do this, you have to do that. So even I would say somebody like Nehru who loved Gandhi, and when you go to Timothy, you see that. But he thought that he could do better without Gandhi because his policies in science, in socialism, and many things would be, and industrialism would be policies that Gandhi would not have approved in the 1950s and 1960s. But I think that there is one point in Gandhi which is important, and this is missed by Arundhati Roy. Actually, there is a Guardian today. She gave an interview to Guardian. Today in Guardian, the Guardian, there is an article on Arundhati Roy, and there are many reactions coming from Indian historians against her, like Mukherjee or like Ramin and others, saying that she doesn't pay very attentive. She's not very attentive to the Indian history, contemporary Indian history. And I think it's correct. I think she uses this in the same way that Zizek did. You know, Zizek came to India. I was here. He gave a talk and he said Gandhi was violent. Gandhi was like Hitler. And Ashish Nandi, who's a bright man and he's got a common sense, unlike Zizek, he told me, he said, but why does he talk like that? I mean, he knows that this is not the truth. I mean, you cannot compare Hitler and Gandhi. And I said, you know, because I know Zizek, I've been to conferences, he likes to be provocative because if he is provocative, people come. He's like a showman. People come. Chomsky is not provocative. He says what he thinks. If people like it or don't like it. Edward Said was not like that. But Zizek has a kind of a show aspect, showman aspect. Same with Arundhati Roy. You know, Arundhati Roy, she represents the Indian left. And she has to keep her radicality at all points, either as a writer or as an intellectual. So
this has been a point which has been very discussed actually on Gandhi in South Africa. Is he a racist? Is he not a racist? My point would be that, and this is what has nothing to do with my approach to Gandhi. My approach to Gandhi is that Gandhi is one of the people who in 1909 identifies in Swaraj the crisis of the dynamic of living together in our civilization. So the problem that we still have is that we don't have this art of living together. We don't know why we are living together. Do you know anyone can stand up and tell me here, why do you live together? What is your telos in life as humanity? Do you know where humanity is going? Anyone in this room can stand up and tell me? Nobody can tell me. Nobody knows where humanity is going. And this is the main problem that Gandhi had in 1909 with modern civilization. Where are we going? Where is this civilization going? And now it's worse even, because at least at the time, in between two wars, and a little bit after the Second World War, with the Frankfurt School, with others, you had an effort of trying to say where we are going and why we are not going there. Like somebody like Marcuse tries to answer this question, why we are not going there if we ever supposed to go. And how can we go? I mean, most of them, they go back to art. And they pose art as aesthetic dimension of Marcuse, negative dialectics of Adorno, or aesthetic of Adorno. They all go back to art because they say in the other domains is lost. We cannot improve. We are going forward in our industrialism. We are going forward in our economic theories. We are going forward in many things, but we have lost the compass. And mostly what we have lost, and we are losing more and more, is the moral compass. And that's why when we don't have leaders like Mandela, Václav Havel, and now is only Dalai Lama, we are left with a lot of questions and we do not know how to solve it. One of the questions which comes up is that even people who win the Nobel Peace Prize, they betray themselves, like Aung San Suu Kyi. And how can we as human beings live with this contradiction? That we, as a human being, as a humanity, give a Nobel Peace Prize to somebody who's supposed to fight for peace and non-violence and for the lives of others. And when she gets to power, she just dismisses thousands of Muslims who are massacred in Myanmar. Okay? So this is the problem that exists. You know? And Gandhi was very conscious about that. Tagore was also very conscious about that, and many others were conscious. But their voice didn't go very far.
Okay, we have less time, so I think we can collect 3 questions and then answer all together.
I will write them down.
Yeah.
It's a technician.
Politics, but what are the roots of those trends? I mean, why we are decivilizing? Why we have
Roots of what, sorry?
roots of what is happening around us? I mean, from where did we come to this pass? And I mean, do you identify any points in history where we could have sort of corrected our path, or I mean, where we could have had a chance at least to save ourselves?
Thank you so much for this presentation. I really enjoyed it, and it was quite provocative in a lot of ways. And there were a few things that really stayed with me. When you invoke thoughtlessness and meaninglessness, and then also the idea of interconnectedness and empathy. Empathy in particular is something which excites me, and when I think about empathy, I try linking it also to the Mahayana Buddhist way of talking about compassion, where empathy becomes one of the steps, where loving kindness becomes one of the steps that lead to altruism and compassion. So I'm just thinking, how does one then migrate, or rather transmigrate from one paradigm or framework which you are invoking, and perhaps try and reconcile with it. And why I'm asking for this kind of reconciliation is because Buddhism as secular ethics versus Buddhism as a religious practice are such different things, and it has its own problematics within this context where we see Sri Lanka as an example of what Theravada Buddhism is doing in the context of Muslim minorities. The second thing which really resonated with me was this idea of education versus training, where you brought in the examples of lawyers. And well, the aim of education is not training, but is to probably train the mind to think in a particular way. But when one tries to connect this and kind of, for lack of a better term, tries to reform it, the question of pedagogy comes into one's mind. But then when we talk about pedagogy, we also talk about the curriculum. And when I talk about the curriculum, at least in the context of India in this moment, it cannot be disconnected from the state. It cannot be disconnected from its politics. And the way the politics is, the way we are trying to erase certain things from our textbooks, and you're trying to erase the history of the past in that sense, is also so. The students are the product of the moment they are in. So if one is thoughtless and one is feeling the meaninglessness, as Sankalp said, the person who posed the question before, it is coming from somewhere. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Murtaza from Afghanistan. I'm studying sociology here. As Isaiah Berlin says that some values are not, I'm saying we cannot combine all values in one time because they are not comparable, compatible. I'm sorry. For example, the justice and liberty, and every civilization has some problem, and every solution creates new problem for the society. For example, if we compare our problem with the past, for example, the destroying and the genocide of ISIS and the Taliban with that of Mongols, it's not comparable. And don't you think that if when we critique this civilization, these problems, it is the sign of the rising the civilization, not the declining the civilization? Because when we critique, as Abdul Karim Suroj says that, when we critique the civilization, we will have some other solution in the future. And I don't understand that. Why do you call it the decline of civilization? Thank you.
Maybe last two questions and then put it over there.
Sir, one of the points which you mentioned regarding the decline of civilization, and which I also read in a book which is called Hind Swaraj, which is in conversation with Mahatma Gandhi. So that particular book pointed out that according to him, one of the key aspects of why the civilization is declining is basically the move towards capitalism and consumerism and the vices that are packed in big cities. So, given that economic development is the need of the hour, drawing from traditional Gandhian studies, can we say that there is an equilibrium between basically having our moral compass intact as well as economic development, which is kind of the need of the hour?
I think I'll have the last word in the last question. I like the concept of decolonization, something that international law has been championing for. Okay, so, yes, sorry. Yes, decolonization. Civilization. Yeah, so my question is, a classic example in France would be the concept of banlieues, which are there. These tall rise buildings where migrants from various neighboring states come in, and these are generally Muslims who are there. And today there's so much of ghettoization of religion out there in banlieues, and this is written across in many of the Western media articles, probably not raised in the other parts of the world. Is about the ghettoization of religion and the disenchantment of religion leading to the crisis of modernity. So you think, and these are my fears, so do you think that excessive involvement in religion is aiding modernity, and therefore modernity is the next evil of the world?
There are many questions, very interesting points to make actually, and I try to make them one by one. Actually, each point I can give 10 lectures because they are so deep and so important. Let me start with the question on Isaiah Berlin. First of all, have you read my book with Isaiah Berlin? Did you know that I did a book of conversation?
Yeah, introduction. I'm sorry, interview, your conversation with
Yes,
Berlin. Yeah.
conversation. So I knew the man very well when I was a student in France, and all through the 1980s and 1990s. I knew him very well, and actually I've written on him a lot, a great deal. And what you were saying, actually, I agree with when he talks about incommensurability of values. But I am not actually going against what Isaiah Berlin used to say, because I'm not saying that I want to combine these values. I say that we do not question anymore these values. For example, we don't ask the question of justice in the same way that Plato asked in the Republic. We don't ask anymore the question of friendship. We don't ask. I remember Bauman, who died last year. He was telling me in a conference where we met, he was a funny man, you know, he was a Polish and very funny man. He said, we were talking about friendship, and he said, you know, I don't understand. I have lived 80 years, and I only have 5 friends. And a friend, somebody goes to the Facebook, and in 1 week they have 2,000 friends. What is this concept of friendship? Now, so this is not questioning the concept. I'm giving you hints about your own daily lives and how you are alienated in Fahrenheit 451. Go and watch the movie. You don't ask questions about all this, you know, absurdity of our way of life. We are living in a very absurd way of civilization where we don't ask any more questions. Everything is for us like it should be, but it's not supposed to be like that. I mean, go back to your classics, they ask questions all the time. Not only Plato asked, Cicero asked, Seneca asked, the Romans, the Iranians, the Persians, the Chinese, they all ask questions. Okay, the Buddhists, they asked the Buddha and the Buddhists, they asked questions about caste and they became Buddhists. They made a revolution of values in Hinduism. Actually, they consider, now there's a famous book which I think very interesting about dissent in Indian culture. In India, there has been a lot of dissent. It's not only argumentative Indian of Mr. Amartya Sen. There has been also dissent. Buddhism is a dissent of Hinduism. And in Islam, mysticism has been a dissent of fiqh. And people like, all these Persian mystics, Afghan mystics that you have, and mystics that you have in Kashmir, who came all the way, or Amir Khusro, Nizamuddin Aulia that you have here, they've been dissenters. Okay? So, concerning Isaiah Berlin, I'm not combining. And there is one thing that Isaiah Berlin says, which I hope that you would hint to it. And he says, we need to live in a decent society. And we don't have a concept of decency. And that's true. We have replaced decency by arrogance. Not only at the level of politicians, but at the level of the students also. Everybody is so arrogant with little knowledge, They think of themselves as small Einsteins, and when you say, well, what have you read, what have you done, what are you going to do with this work, they don't know. And the result would be Zuckerberg. And the result would be Microsoft, meaning too much arrogance, but with no questioning. So I'm not saying that we don't need the internet, and we are not stopping in industries or anything, but we need the questioning about technology, we need the questioning about science, we need the questioning about the questioning about the questioning, about the art of questioning. So that's one point. The other point is that the gentleman who talked about Hind Swaraj of Gandhi, written on a ship actually in 3-4 weeks' time, and in a form of conversation again. And it's in that book in 1909, Gandhi says that he defines civilization as the path of beauty. He says civilization for me is the path of beauty. But why does he bring the concept of beauty and not right, like the liberals? Because first of all, Gandhi is a critique of liberalism. He's a reader of John Ruskin. he's a reader of Henry David Thoreau, he's a reader of Tolstoy. So they are all critiques of liberalism and utilitarianism in 19th century. And he wants actually, what he's talking about, Gandhi, what he talks about, he says, I want to redefine civilization. And this is the point which I think people like Gandhi can still be very relevant for today's work, because we can go and think with them about, okay, if somebody is missing in our civilization, what is missing? Gandhi used to say modern civilization is immoral. Morality is missing. Morality is still missing in our civilization. I talked about moral compass, not the existence of moral compass. So one of the examples, going back to your question, one of the examples of this absence of moral compass and a civilization which doesn't know where it is going is like Hurricane Harvey. You know, it's going this way, that way, destroys things, and doesn't know. Is what has been done in the past few years with refugees. You know, I wrote a piece, and it was published in Indian Express, and many people were furious about this piece. So they started insulting me, you know, on the internet and this and that. And they said, well, this guy is, you know, originally a Muslim. So Muslim, I said, it has nothing to do with Islam, or I can be a Hindu, a Buddhist, or anything. I didn't write it from a religious perspective. And why did they become so insulting, and why did they work? Because I said that the question, this problem of refugees and the boat people that we're seeing today, where kids are drowned in the seas and everything, is a moral decline of our civilization. It's a moral decline. Because when Australians, they send refugees to Papua New Guinea, and you have people who commit suicide there. And because the conditions are so bad that they commit suicide, and they are raped, and they commit suicide. This means that the conventions that we have, international conventions that we have, Declaration of Human Rights, Geneva Convention, I don't know, the protocols of the 1960s, this Convention of the Rights of the Child, and this and that. It's nonsense. We cannot defend ourselves with these conventions. Nobody believes in it. Nobody. A government which says, I'm a liberal government, civilized government, like Australia, they do this. So, what at the end of the day, when we are thinking about it, what is the conclusion we get to? What kind of conclusion? Of course, we become critical, and we ask questions about ourselves and about our future. So, in relation to that, one of the questions that you asked, you said, you talked about what are the roots of what is happening to us. And I think the roots comes from the very beginning of modernity. For example, if you go on back, right now I'm teaching Descartes, French philosopher, father of subjectivism, father of modern rationality. Descartes is somebody he talks about common sense, okay? But scientifically speaking and philosophically speaking, Descartes is a reductionist. And what does he say, which in our world, after 400 years after Descartes, we should be critical toward what at this part of it. He says we have to be, in French he says, nous devons être maîtres possesseurs de la nature. We have to be masters and possessors of nature. Masters and possessors of nature means technological expansion.